All right. So often overlooked is the that little tool called the greatest common factor. All right. So on this one, this is actually not a quadratic, and the leading term is not a one. Right. But if you always make it a priority to look for factoring out the GCF first, like that's always the first thing on your to-do list, uh, you'll see that this will become, just like the previous examples where it's a quadratic and the leading term is still a one. All right. So it's always going to make your life easier if you always look for factoring out the GCF first. So in this one, 5 divides evenly into all the terms, and they all have an x. So what I need to do first before I start this problem is factor out a 5x. All right, so my 5x cubed term is going to end up becoming an x squared. This is like that reverse distributive property. 5x times x squared gives me 5x to the third. And then 5x times an 8x will give me 40x squared. And then 5 times 16 will give me 80. All right, and then x times there will give me my 80x. Okay. All right, so now that it's written like this, and the stuff that's in this set of parentheses, so I'm going to break that down one step further. That's going to be the thing I want to factor into two binomials, if possible. All right, so go ahead and bring down the 5x, or you can just wait until the very end if you want to. But we're going to factor this thing into two of those binomials, x and an x. All right, we want two numbers that multiply to 16 and add up to 8. All right, that's a 4 and a 4. They're the same signs, and they're both going to be positive. All right, they're both pluses. All right, that would be our answer. All right, or if you wanted to write it like x plus 4 all to the second power, I guess you could write it like that. That'd be a little bit more concise, wouldn't it? All right, got that one out of the way. Let's look at another one. This one's involving a negative this time. So yeah, again, the first step here was to determine what each term had in common. That was how I knew I needed to put a 5x out here. They all had a 5, and they all had an x in common. Negative x squared minus 2x, plus 2x, and minus 8. What am I doing? I'm doing it wrong. Give me one sec. Negative x squared minus 2x plus 8. That's what I meant to put. Okay, there's my next example. So in this one, the leading term is a negative 1. But anytime that your leading term is negative, I told you guys you always want to factor out that negative. And that's because it makes factoring it into these two binomial things a lot easier. So take your negative out. So to be a negative, and all I'm going to do is just change the signs here. So it's going to be an x squared. It'll be a positive 2x, and it'll be a negative 8. All right, but all that stuff's in parentheses. So if I had distributed my negative back in, I would get this expression. All right, so I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to factor it into two binomials. X times x will give me that x squared. I want two numbers that multiply to 8 and subtract to give me 2. 2 and 4. They multiply to 8 and they subtract to give me 2. Now to determine my signs here, notice I'm using my new quadratic, I guess, not my old one. That's why I said that they had to subtract to 8. They're different signs, and the bigger number is going to be positive. So my 4 is positive, and my other one is negative. Test it out if you want to. These two things are going to multiply back to this one right here, is what they would do. All right, that's factored. All right, last one is going to be something that's very often overlooked. Let's just say we wanted to factor x squared plus 5x. So there's only two terms, there's not three. The GCF, that's going to be the trick here. All right, you don't want to think of two numbers that multiply to nothing and add up to 5. That's not the way that you would want to think of it. Here you can just focus on that factoring out the GCF. These two terms, they have an x in common. Okay, that's what they have in common, so I'm going to factor that out. My x squared just becomes an x, and my 5x just becomes a 5. There it is. I'm done. No trouble, no tricks. That's something you want to keep in your back pocket. Keep yourself familiar with factoring out the GCF. It's often overlooked.